Let's
All
go.
right. I've been really excited for this one. Honestly, Ishan, like the reason why we didn't have you first was because it would have looked like super rigged, like my part and KG's part. But yeah, man, interesting story. So the reason why we sort of set this up and the topic that I want to talk about, after I left Scribe, I got like this huge pile of DMs, like people asking me about how Scribe succeeded, how do they start a marketing agency, like individual contributors who are trying to be like advisors and they're trying to help projects on the side and eventually trying to make like a marketing agency out of it. Um, I was surprised those DMs like sort of just came flooding in. So I think a really great conversation for anyone listening is like sort of shoot like this one-on-one on like, how did you start Scribe? What's the dynamics of the business? How are you expanding? There's a lot that I've learned from you, a lot that I don't share publicly either. And I think it's best coming out, straight from the source. Yeah, you want to give a short intro?
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited to do this. Yeah, you guys know I have a lot of love for both of you guys, and I've watched you guys grow. So, and watching you guys get into this is awesome to see. Yeah, me, I'm Ishan, one of the co-founders of Scribe. Before getting into crypto, I was in private equity, had my own PE fund. It's like low 8 figures, nothing too crazy. Caught the DeFi bug in like 2019. Had some friends show me the early blue chip stuff, Maker, Aave, Eatland at the time, Compound, stuff like that. Just immediately kind of head over heels, like, oh shit, I didn't even understand Ethereum smart contracts, but I got DeFi and it just clicked to me. And then I started to dig into, okay, well, how does this stuff work? How is it permissionless? How is it censorship resistant? What are the benefits of that? Went down the DeFi rabbit hole, kind of, handed the keys over to the fund and was like, hey, I got to go figure this thing out, right? Is this just Ponzi-nomics, or is there, something real here? Is this really like future finance type stuff? So, started spending way too much time in the space, went through DeFi summer, did okay for myself in DeFi summer, then started working in the space, contributing around. I generally had a thesis that if you really wanted to, there was so much information asymmetry in the space that if you really wanted to become, a figure in the space or become really successful or trade really well, you had to work in the space full time. You had to really commit. And so I started working in the space, started contributing to a lot of different protocols, and was mostly writing and sharing theses and ideas and things like that. And then one thing led to another, and met Ross, started Scribe, and then just kept kind of rolling it up a very, very large hill. And then yeah, things compound over time. And one client turns into two clients, two turns into four turns into eight, slowly and slowly. And then you wake up one day and you're like, oh fuck, there's like 70, 80, 100 people here. And yeah, and that's just kind of where Scribe started from.
How do you meet Ross and Arthur, and what's like the origin story there?
Yeah. So funny story. During this time when I was contributing, I was like, I was a nobody, right? I mean, realistically still am, but I had no Twitter presence. I was just a guy that's kind of lurking around, and I started to try to do the personal brand thing a little bit. Wasn't really working out too well, and funny enough, at the time, Ross actually had a pretty good personal brand. I mean, still does, but he's not super active on it. But he was actually like he was like doing the whole, I'm going to be the crypto content guy. And he had a couple small clients. And so he put out a tweet that said something along the lines of like, hey, I'm looking for content writers in crypto. And, his tweet came up organically for me. I wasn't following him or anything. Followed him, shot him a DM saying, hey, like I do a lot of this already. I do this for a lot of projects. Would love to chat. And we shot the shit. We just instantly clicked, and we were thinking about the same things. We were thinking about the same problem. Most importantly, we were both like looking around at DeFi and more technical projects, and realized these guys have no idea how to communicate to their audience. And so there was just a massive gap in the market, right? And having both of us seen contributing to protocols, that there was a very big supply demand gap of the skills needed to communicate about these protocols to a general audience, right? And so I think the best businesses come out of problems you see and how you solve them, and that's what we did. So we saw this problem, we solved it, and originally when we started, we were just working on a couple small projects, getting small little retainers, and then we were just kind of messing around, shooting the shit with it. And I just always had this idea and a structure about how to build like a good content agency, which is kind of how Scribe originated. And I had a really big vision of what I wanted to build, and I was like, okay, well, we can start here, we can roll it into something else, kind of build ad services, ad offerings, and we could potentially turn this into like a really big agency. And I kind of showed him the vision. And I'm a very put your money where your mouth is kind of guy. And so Ross was he was doing like the digital nomad work from home or like work remotely kind of thing. And he was in Costa Rica, and he's a big surfer, and he's out there, in like some bumfuck town in Costa Rica. And he's just surfing and working. And I was like, fuck it, I will come down there. We will shoot the shit. I will show you this big vision, show you I'm serious about it, and like, let's do this thing. And went out there. We spent 3 days together, and we were working on a couple of small clients already. I helped him out with some stuff that he already had going on, and he saw the vision, and he was like, hey, if you're down to commit to this thing, and like we like kind of drop everything else we're working on, like, let's do this thing. We'll just go in on it 50-50. And he took the chance on me more than anything. And and that's like where it officially started. We're like, okay, like we're gonna do this thing. We're gonna give it a shot.
So you did not know Ross before that? Like, you guys weren't friends? You weren't like Mike and Yano, who'd known each other for like 11, 12 years? What was the point where you were like, okay, Ross is legit? Ross was like, yeah, Ishan's legit, and let's just go all into this. Like, was there a moment, or was there like a point in that history where you were like, yeah, this is it?
It's a good question. We did not know each other at all. So this is not like a Blockwork story where it's like, hey, we've been friends for so long. Like, we literally did not know each other at all. We had only been trading DMs, and I think we hopped on like 2 Zoom calls before me just taking the onus to just go out there and meet the guy. And so looking back, it was kind of crazy. Like, he could have been like a serial killer, right? Like, it's like some guy I met on the internet 2 different times. And like, I did a little bit of digging, and like, funny enough, I told my mom I was going to do this, and she started doing some digging on Ross too. She was like, who is this guy that like Ishan's going to go meet? And my mom's like, you guys know this. My mom's like Indian auntie, like, doesn't, barely speaks English. Like, she's like, looking up him on Facebook and trying to find his parents. And I'm like, I don't think it's going to work. And so, it was a little crazy of a thing to do in retrospect. But yeah, we had no previous relationship. It was more like a leap of faith. I saw that he had at that time the problem that I could not solve for, which is distribution and reach. And so I understood how to structure and build the business and how to do the work, but I did not have the distribution to go out there and get clients. And he was already getting in a couple small clients. And it's funny that is what got us together, because once things started to roll, actually our roles totally flipped. But yeah, we can get to that in a little bit. But yeah, it was more like, this guy's distribution, I know how to build this thing. I already had this thesis in my head that this was a doable business, and this was a problem that needed solving, and that this could create a service. And so I was honestly just like, I was on the hunt for somebody to do this with me, and I was looking really aggressively. And so, and it just worked out that Ross was also doing this, and he was doing it on a good scale already. And so then it was like, hey, I know how to build this thing. You already are kind of doing this a little bit, and you have really great distribution. I mean, at the time you had like 8,000 followers, and you're talking about like, early 22, like mid 2022. And so like, market is ripping, everyone's excited, he's got a good following, money's flowing. We're not at all-time highs, but we're still like, at that time above a 60K Bitcoin down, or I don't remember what the numbers were, but we were still doing really well. I want to say we were probably still at like a 50-60K Bitcoin pre-Luna. And so things were looking really well. And so that's where, I was like, okay, well, this guy's distribution, I know how to build this thing. You put 2 and 2 together, and hopefully we can make 5.
You mentioned about like sharing your vision with Ross, and you have this vision of building Scribe. Was it at that time? Was it still about building around the content and filling that gap, or you still had the vision of what Scribe is today?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I'm most proud of about Scribe is that we had a very specific vision, and of course it's shifted a little bit, but more or less, not only have we hit exactly what we've thought we've we were going to hit, but we've also done it on like the same timeline that we thought we would. And you guys know I'm a pretty optimistic, aggressive guy. And so I was like, oh, we're going to do, we're going to hit this much revenue in 1 year, and we're going to hit this much revenue in 2 years. And in 5 years, we're going to do this. And then we're going to launch all this kind of stuff. And it's kind of crazy looking back. It's been like 2.5 years now that we've kind of hit every single ridiculously crazy, aggressive goal that I had in mind. And so the thesis originally was like, hey, there's a big problem in the market around content, right? Like needing to create long form, short form content. And so that's and with a focus on more technical projects, right? Because there's an inherent barrier, right? Like one of the hard things about agencies is that there's theoretically no moat to the business, right? Of course, once you get into the business, you realize there are moats you can build, but theoretically, it's like anyone can start this business. And so with that, you needed to have niche differentiation. I'm a huge proponent of niche differentiation, especially when you get into low mo businesses. If you have some kind of niche you can dominate, it becomes a lot easier to kind of get into a market and grow and scale into it. And so our niche differentiation was like, hey, we're going to do long form and short form content for DeFi protocols. And then eventually we're going to get into more technical stuff, right? Infrastructure, L1s, L2s. And then we're going to slowly start adding other services, right? I always knew PR was incredibly impactful. I had seen PR in action, and I never understood it, but there was something, it was almost like a black box where you don't know exactly what you're getting. I mean, this was me back in 2022, coming from private equity, not knowing anything about marketing as like a core, science really. So like I looked at it and, like I always knew PR would be of incredible value to go along these things. And generally our thesis was and is still the same thing, which is what are other service verticals that we can offer that are typically low capex, like capital expenditure, right? Which are services that are not super expensive to start, right? You don't need $5 million to go start a new revenue stream. You can just do it with a little bit of labor and elbow grease. And then I think one of the most valuable things is synergism, which is does the growth of one unit or one vertical actually end up helping and creating a flywheel for other verticals, right? Which is to say, oh, well, you came to us for long form content, and because you heard we're really good at long form content, can you guys do our short form content too, right? Well, yeah, of course, right? Like it's very low capex to begin to offer short form content if you do long form content, and if you are really good at long form content, it probably helps you get more clients and grow a short form content business, right? And then we applied that logic to PR, right? And then we just so that was generally was
no, that makes sense. And okay, so you started off with content like long form, short form, and I'm guessing like between you and Ross, you guys could figure that out. What are the different verticals now? So you mentioned PR, there's content. Like, what's the Scribe full stack right now?
Yeah, so we've done both expanded and contracted, and I think that's a really powerful thing to learn about over time. Is at one point we were like, oh fuck, like this is all going so well, like we did long form, we did short form, and then the next obvious iteration was design, and we started doing graphic design and videos and teasers and stuff like that, and then it was like, oh, we do PR, and so then we were like, oh fuck, we're like 4 for 4 at this point. What else can we do, right? Fuck, let's do BD. Fuck, let's do growth. Let's do like, what are the other things out there we can do? And community, like let's do, and oh, you need something done? We can figure it out and we can do it. And that was obviously in hindsight, not the right way to think about it. And so what we realized is that there's a better way to categorize a lot of offerings, right? Like there's a lot of mini things you can do, but that does not mean that that's going to turn into a really successful business unit in and of itself, right? Or a really successful service to offer. Like there's a big difference between the type of client that makes sense for business development as maybe a service that you do with an agency, and like public relations that you would do, right? And there's a big difference between the types of firms that need those things and the types of like things you can offer those teams and the type of impact you can have. And so you start to realize that actually you shouldn't think about things in what can we do. You should think about things in terms of what makes most sense to do, right? Or in a business capacity, and then also like a drive value capacity. And that's when we realized, okay, well, we need to kind of contract this thing a little bit. And so today Scribe it's 3 things, right? It's creative, it's content, it's communications, right? So creative is rather than just offering graphic design as a service, there's a whole other layer of creative that is like building brand, right? Which is like this magical thing that people in crypto haven't able to crack or really even wrap their heads around, which is like, how do you build a world-class brand? Like, this is something that I don't think anyone in Web3 has done incredibly well, that we spend a lot of time thinking about how to do within the context of Web3. That also goes into like a big piece of brand building is visual identity, right? What does your website look like? What is your logos and your brand and your typography and all that kind of shit, right? And then there's also like the more important part of brand, in my personal opinion, which is what does your project mean, right? What is the problem that you're solving, right? Can we get that really clear and concise? What is the narrative that you're really trying to build on, or kind of show that this is where the world is going and this is the puck that we're skating to? What is the positioning against competitors, right? Those are all incredibly important creative pieces, right? Like if you're just like, we talk about this a lot, you guys are going to get this, right? We talk so much about how there's so much monotony in the industry, where it's like everybody is like, oh, we're going to make blockchains faster, and we're going to make them more efficient, and we're going to make them more decentralized, and we're going to make them more modular, and AI, and like there's so much monotony that in order to really stand out, you need differentiation, and there's a lot of differentiation to be had in creative positioning, creative, narrative building, things like that. Like it all doesn't need to be the same. You have to stick out from the crowd. So there's creative, there's content, long form, short form, creative content, even paid budget content, right? Like anything we can do on the content side, we do. And then communications, media relations, which is, to kind of distill it as like, how you communicate to the public, how you leverage media, getting into CoinDesk, Cointelegraph, doing Bloomberg TV and CoinDesk TV, and, just really growing thought leadership in that way, right? So it's creative, content, communications.
Can you talk a little bit about the revenue percentages? At least like not the numbers, but like how much of what part contributes to the entire business?
Yeah, I would say today it's probably like 40-40-20, with 20 being creative, because that's one that we've been building out a lot recently. So when I look at it, it's probably 40 to 50%, or 40% communications, 40% content, 20% is in creative. But pretty soon we think we'll get to kind of close to a third. And that's kind of the ideal place that we want to be, because while you can look at them independently, we really push projects to think about these three things holistically, which is these are all really, really important pieces to building a really great brand and campaign. And if you're doing one really well and not the others, none of them are as effective, right? Like, for example, you can do brand really well, but if you're not doing content to build that brand, or you're not doing proper thought leadership and communications, the brand's not going to get out there as much, right? And same thing with the content that you do, right? If you don't have really strong brand and you don't have really strong communications, then the content that you do is just not going to hit the same. And so ideally, it's like, hey, you're doing all three with us all the way through. And so then that's when you ideally get to like a third. And then also there's like, I don't know, there's probably other services out there that we want to add, other businesses that we want to do, things like that, which all comes in the future. But as far as today, like the Scribe agency, ideally we get to a third. Today is probably cool.
100%. And like our journey like is kind of gone vertical, and at some point there's been this inflection point of exponential growth. But if we take a step back, talking about in the initial days, how do you guys get your first client? Was this the time around FTX? And like what did that initial the days of Scribe look like?
Yeah, we have some funny stories from early clients. There was like a couple random small projects like, honestly, I don't even remember the names of at this point, like super, super small stuff. The first big one we got, or the first decent sized one, was Gains Network. And I have so much love for that protocol, for those guys that I mean, it still runs obviously to this day, but that was like the first. I never saw GMX as like really decentralized, because I mean the games that were played on that protocol, but I mean that like GMX was definitely the first big perp dex. I mean DYDX technically was, but GMX was like the first interesting one. They had the GLP mechanism, and they like really innovated on the perp space, rather than just like DYDX, which is originally like StarkX off-chain matching, on-chain settlement, stuff like that, right? In the order book, whereas like GLP was like unique economics, right? And Gains, I think, took that even further and really put a focus on decentralization. For example, like originally the counterparty pool at Gains was only DAI, right? And we thought that was super interesting because that showed just like the extent of which there was decentralization, and there was a lot of really interesting economics around like asset listing and max OI, and there was a lot of like really innovative stuff that was done at that time around that protocol. And and that was our first really big client that did really successfully. So I think after, and this was right after Luna, so like everything is down, everything is getting crushed. And I want to say at the time, like Gains GNS was like, I don't know, maybe 20 cents.
I think you shorted on the gains as well, right?
Yeah, I did a big I had a big FTX short on Gains. And yeah, it was so they were our first one, and it was really interesting because they were doing a lot of innovative stuff. So there was a lot of stuff to talk about on like a technical content level, right? We were one of the first users of tokenized vaults, right? I want to say it's 4337, EIP 4337. But like the first ones to tokenize vaults where you could put your DAI into the pool, and then you would get like a GDAI receipt token, and that would represent the deposit that you have for your DAI collateral that you're gaining yield on, and then you could use that to maybe go borrow against that on some of those early like Polygon and Arbitrum borrow lend protocols, right? And so there was a lot of cool stuff to write about. There was a lot of interesting like decentralization ethos stuff. And when the market was down, there was a time where the best performing asset in the entire industry was GNS, right? Where I think between post Luna, so this was like June 2022 to February 2023, I think GNS did like a 10x or a 15x, while the entire market was basically down only. And so the entire market's down only, and GNS is just crushing. And so then everyone starts to look like, what the fuck is happening over there, right? Like, and a lot of it was like we spent a lot of time building the narrative around like, post sex, like dexes were really valuable, derivative dexes are where more market share is going, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's when we first started to catch a little bit of fire of like people were like, fuck, what are the Gains guys doing? And Seb and the Gains guys were always great to us, and they were always like, dude, the Scribe guys, they're so good, they get it, they understand what the market wants to hear and read about, and they build awesome narratives, and they probably pushed us more than they should have or needed to. But they helped us get a lot of business from there. So like, it's always about having that one really, really good case study. I mean, dude, I think still to this day, we talk about the Gains case study in our sales process. You're talking about like 2 years ago, plus almost 3, at this point, almost 3 years ago. And people are still talking about the Gains case study because it was so successful when the entire market was puking. And a lot of that's not, I mean, we can pat ourselves in the back and tell us we did great work. Like, so much of that is probably like had nothing to do with us. And it was just, there was revenue generating, and there was so many narratives it was capturing, and it was objectively a really fucking great product. But marketing is like, you can't market a shit product. I mean, if you can, just points, right? And the EV on just launching shitcoins, if you really know how to like play the degen shitcoin game, is way better there. But like, you need a good product if you want to do really high quality kind of go to market. And we had that. And so then we had an awesome case study to run with. And then it became a lot easier because we were like, hey man, look at what we did with Gains. Like, have you seen this CoinGecko price? Like, you want to pull up the chart? And so then everything becomes a lot easier to sell because you're like, hey, proof's in the pudding, man.
Yeah. And I think with Gains, like, I think what you said about, the product doing something, like, it's important for the product to do something, but it's also important for the team to understand how to communicate that. Like, I remember during the Gains era when the Luna crash happened, but Gains didn't stop the trades on Luna. Like, they were like, this is decentralized, we're not going to stop this. Whereas every other, perp dex did. You guys communicating that was important. Then after FTX, the whole messaging around, post centralized exchanges, this is all going to go decentralized. I do understand why that case study was sort of Scribe's sort of premier case study, like poster boy. That's sort of like, I would say that was like more 1 to 10. Do you have like a moment in your history where you're like, okay, now we're playing in the big leagues, this is the inflection point for Scribe, where it's like, okay, we did the 1 to 10, now we're at 1,000. Like, what was that point in Scribe's history?
In my view, that was kind of the 0 to 1 because that was like the first big one that we needed. Like we needed some kind of proof in the pudding besides like look at these awesome articles we wrote, because like you can send the examples to everybody, no one's reading that shit, right? And so but like you tell somebody, hey, look, we did all of this stuff, and we're not saying it's all us, but look at this number go up, that is pretty powerful. And I think that is what got us in the position to get our first really big deal, which was Mantle, probably. So this was Mantle. Mantle had launched a DevNet, and it did not go super well. And you're talking about the amount of cash that Mantle had coming out of Bybit. It was like, hey, the world's largest DAO is being turned into an L2. And they launched a DevNet, did not go well, and they were kind of scrambling. They were like, okay, well, if we don't get people in here that can do something, we're all going to get fired. And so then that helped us get Mantle, and we did a lot of the early work for Mantle to kind of get that off the ground. And at one point, it was one of the first L2s. It was an early mover, and it had really good backing, and they had good positioning. And it's awesome to see how much Mantle's evolved over time. But they were our first big client. And so then when you have the big unlock, in my view, early on was when you have a really good case study, and then you pair that with a big name. That's all of the safety that someone is looking for in making a decision, right? When you talk to an agency, there is no guarantee of success, right? All you're looking to do through conversations of evaluating agencies is actually just mitigating risk, right? Which is, I'm going to pay all these guys money in a similar way that you hire somebody. You go through an interview process to hire somebody. You use references and past experience and a resume in order to mitigate the risk of hiring somebody, saying, I'm not just going to pick some guy off the street. I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to talk to other people he's worked with. I'm going to look at his resume in order to say, okay, I'm not just going to waste my money with this guy. And in the same way, protocols do a similar exercise with agencies in order to decide, which is, what information can I pull out of them so that if this, in a worst case scenario, does not work out, that I can say it wasn't my fault, right? Like I did the work, I did proper due diligence. This is where you get this common like quip in traditional marketing where it's like, nobody gets fired hiring Edelman, right? Which is like the largest traditional agency in the world, or Ogilvy, right? It's like, you don't get fired hiring those guys. You try to like make a ballsy decision going with a young upstart. That's something, if you're like Kellogg's or something like that's something that'll get you fired, right? Like wasting money on something like that. You won't get fired going to Ogilvy because like, dude, it's Ogilvy, right? Well, why? It's because they have brand, they have history, they have experience. Like they have all of these things, right? Well, when you're a young upstart agency, you don't have a lot of that brand and experience. And so how do you go into conversations in such a nascent industry that doesn't have a ton of great agencies, that hasn't been around for so long, that doesn't have that Edelman or Ogilvy yet? How do you go into a conversation and mitigate risk for teams and for organizations, right? Well, you tell them, look at this awesome case study and look at these other big names that we've worked with. And then they're like, oh, fuck. Okay. Well, like that's a pretty good risk mitigator for me. Cause it's like, dude, it seems like they did really great work here and they've worked with some big names. It's almost similar to like how a lot of like shit VCs underwrite where they're like, oh, Polychain's on the cap table. Like, this guy's gotta be good. Right. And so in the same way, it's like, oh, fuck, like Mantle hired them. Like they gotta be good. Right. They gotta be okay. And so that makes those conversations go a lot easier. And that's when we were really able to start rolling into more opportunities and get like, more. And once you get that first 3, 4, 5 clients under your belt, it's a lot easier to start rolling it if you roll it the right way and take those revenues and invest them into the right stuff, into the right people, into the right opportunities, things like that. But without that momentum, it's really fucking hard.
Yeah. I think the takeaway here for anyone listening that's trying to start an agency is get your first big win, be communicated properly why you were the reason that protocol won, and then try to get a big name client. Once you get to that point, then it'll be a lot easier for you to win other deals. I think one thing that we didn't touch on, Ishan, is the impact of hiring. How did you guys think about hiring? I'm not trying to self-show, but like, how did you think of your first hire? Let's maybe talk about Joey, because he was more into like the main work stream and I used to do a lot of the KOL stuff. Like, what was the point where you were like, okay, main business is doing good. I don't think it's replicable for me, Arthur, and Ross to continue doing this. Let's bring someone in.
Yeah, and I think this is where 99% of agencies go to die, which is like, okay, like you're doing okay. At that time we were maybe doing like 50K a month in revenue between like three of us that were working at Scribe, me, Ross, and Arthur. And so we were like, okay, well, we're doing okay now. Like we have some decent cash flow. How do we grow and scale? And one thing I've always thought of is like a little bit of a superpower of mine is um, knowing when to hire, knowing what to hire, and knowing like evaluating the person that you're hiring, right? So it's like, well, one, the biggest thing is like, when do you hire? Well, I guess the number one question is, what do you need, right? And that's the biggest thing I see people get wrong, even at the biggest companies, which is not being able to properly evaluate what is the need that I have here, right? What is the blocker? And so what is that person or that position that I need to fill in order to unlock other things, right? Unlock more scale, more leverage, more quality of work, things like that, right? And then the second thing is like, when do you hire that person, right? Because so many companies die because they overhire, they underhire, people get burnt out, things like that. And then the third piece again is just like, can you pinpoint the right person? Do you know the skills or the experience that you're looking for in order to make all of that work, right? So you can say, I know what I'm looking for and I know when I need it, but if you don't pick the right person, everything is moot, right? And so I think doing those three things is like a little bit of my superpower that helped us really scale Scribe really effectively. So it was like, okay, well, what is the bottleneck that we have, right? Well, the bottleneck that we have is, even before we hired any one person, we realized the bottleneck that we had between just me, Ross, and Arthur was that all of us were doing everything, which was a terrible idea in hindsight, right? It's like, hey, we're all doing sales. We're all, you're meeting with one client, I'm meeting with one client. Okay, we're talking about it. I mean, we're doing like daily stand-ups. We're all kind of in the know of what's going on. But it's like, we're all talking about stuff, but we're all doing sales. We're all managing accounts. We're all writing content. We're all doing everything, right? And once we started doing well, it kind of came to the realization like, okay, well, hey, Arthur, you are way better at managing and operating this stuff than I ever will be. Why am I operating and not doing well and you're operating and doing really well? Like, we need to fix that. And it was like, okay, well, like Ross, you are way better at writing the content than me and Arthur. So like, why am I spending time context switching and writing content? And whereas like you're way better at it. And then on the third side, it was like sales and BD, where it was like, oh, you guys, like I am really good at this, and I've always felt like I just had just a natural skill for it, and like I'm really good at this, and maybe you guys are not as good at this. And so then you start to realize like, oh, instead of all of us doing everything, which is like, everyone's just kind of running around with the chicken with their head cut off, we need to establish roles. And that's where the original kind of structure came out, where it was like, Ross would do all the content, Arthur would manage the clients, and then I would kind of do the sales. Also, this was like post FTX, where like, again, we kind of flipped Ross and I's role, where then I kind of had a decent sized personal brand, and I started bringing in a lot of the client flow, and then Ross was obviously way better at doing the content, and so that was the original structure. So then if that's the structure, it's like, okay, well, what is our barrier to scale at that point? So we have some clients, and so the barrier to scale is always two things. It's always client inbound, and it's quality of work to be done, right? Or people to do the work and how quality the work is. At that point, post FTX, there was no bottleneck on opportunities, right? On new business opportunities. We felt really good that we could get in more clients. So if that's not the bottleneck, then you have to identify what is the bottleneck. Well, if we can get in more clients, then we need more people to service more clients, right? Or else eventually our bandwidth's gonna finish, right? And so then it's like, okay, well then the bottleneck is people to work on clients. And that's when Joey came in, Joey Campbell, who's awesome. He's at some Bitcoin project now. He's been there for a while. Where's he at?
Mezzo. Is that
Mezzo.
Mezzo?
And he was awesome, and he was our first real hire. And because he was a great account manager, and at that point we were scrappy, he would also write a lot of the content too. But again, it was like, we identified the person, right? We identified the problem, which is that we needed more people to work on accounts, because that's where the bottleneck was. We identified when we needed it, which is fucking ASAP, right? Like we had the capital to do it. And so then fuck it, like, let's just do it. We had, enough cash to our name to be able to do it. And then we identified the right person, which is candidly, like we tried someone else before Joey that didn't work out. And great guy. It just didn't work out, and so then we started to say, okay, who is the right person? We started to ask around, and this is a time where we would chat a lot with Jack Newald, infamous KOL, great guy. And he was like, hey, I have this guy that's been helping me with some of my content. I think he'd be really good at some of the stuff you guys are doing. You guys want to chat with him? And I think when you're an early business and you don't have the ability to acquire talent, right? Like, today, thankfully, knock on wood, like Scribe has built a big enough brand where people want to come work at Scribe. Obviously, when we were 4 people, that was not the case. And so when you're a scrappy young company like that, your best hires will come from referrals, because someone else in your network is putting their name on the line saying, hey, you should hire this guy. And I think that's the most powerful thing in the world, right? It's like someone else is like, you got to bring this guy in. He's good. And so when you're an early company and you don't have your pick of the litter, you're like, fuck, you vouch for him, then like, and you interview him and he sounds good. And that's when we were able to pick the right person. So again, that goes back to like the skill of picking the right person. And Joey was awesome, and Joe was so instrumental to us and opened up so many doors for us. But then again, like it just goes back to like, because I was myself and Jeff Renault was just awesome in helping us get client flow, that for the longest, I mean, since basically the Scribe started, the bottleneck has never been client flow. It's always been, can we do world-class work, and can we bring in people to do world-class work? And so it actually made it really easy to scale, because there's 2 problems, and we solved one of them really easily, to where it was never a problem, which is client flow. And so in all of our business since we've started Scribe, we've never done any outbound. It's only been inbound. And so that was never an issue for us. And so then the only thing we had to realize and figure out and solve for was, how do we do world-class work, and how do we hire and train and get people better? And then it was a pretty easy decision where it's like, oh man, we can get more business, then let's throw more money into hiring, throw more money into team building, into culture and all this kind of stuff. And so looking back, honestly, I haven't really thought about it in this context, but it's actually a pretty easy build out, because we were able to solve the hardest problem early on, which is what kills most agencies, which is, how do you get paying customers, right? Which is what kills most businesses, I'd assume.
100%. And uh, on hiring, especially, like a lot of conversation right now is, should projects still hire based on their nativeness to the space, or should they bring in more people who are very experienced in TradFi big institutions? Should they bring them in? I know that Scribe personally emphasizes on being more crypto native and being in the trenches and stuff like that. uh, I think that was more of an emphasis maybe a couple of years, where you need to be in the trenches to understand the stuff. Do you think that has changed a little over the last couple of years? And are you still like, are we over indexing this crypto nativeness, and do you still prefer people who are native rather than others?
Do you mean in the context of clients or in the context of hires?
Hiring, like talent.
Talent. It's a good question. I think it's important to have a mix, right? One of the really hard things in Web3 is the talent pool is small, right? Like we're still a really, really small industry, right? Like even if you look at what are we, like 3 trillion ish today? Like, I mean, my long-term view on the space is like, you know, 20, 40, 50 trillion, right? So I think there's like a multiple x's to go in the space, and that's going to bring even more people into the industry, exponentially more people in the industry. But the problem is like crypto obviously skews pretty young, right? Like and the problem, I mean, the trade-off, I don't see problems, I always see trade-offs. And the trade-off is, if you have a bunch of young people in the industry that are very passionate about the industry, that eat, breathe, and sleep the future of finance, or the future of the internet, or on chain is the new online, whatever, is that when they're pretty young, they don't have a ton of experience, right? And so you have people that are very passionate about the space, but maybe don't have really great experience, especially I'll just use our example, right? When it comes to, I mean, even generally, just like people don't have experience building world-class companies. We see it all the time with founders, where it's like, you're a 25-year-old kid who built an awesome protocol that raised 10 million bucks. Like, you are incredibly smart. You do not know how to build a company. Like, you have no idea, because you've never been around it, because you came straight out of college, and yes, you're smart and you can problem solve and you can figure some things out, but you don't know how to build world-class organization, right? Like, you do not know how to build a company of 100 people, much less 1,000 people, or much less 10,000 people, like a Coinbase, right? And so that's a trade-off that you have to make. And so when you evaluate someone individually, you're like, yeah, you can be incredibly crypto native, but if you've never worked a job before, you've never worked a corporate job before, you've never worked with other people before, outside of like when I was in high school, I was like a tutor at Mathnasium or Kumon or something like that, then like there's going to be learning curves, right? There's going to be growing pains. And that takes a certain type of individual that is willing to grow through growing pains and, accept that, they have a lot of work to do personally to be a really great employee or to be a really good contributor outside of how passionate or knowledgeable you are about crypto. You can be in the 99th percentile about everything that's happening on chain, and you can be a really, really shit worker, right? Like those two things those are 100% mutually exclusive. And so just because someone is incredibly knowledgeable about crypto does not mean that they're going to be have the traits that create someone who's really good at a job, right? And every job has different skills that are needed, right? And so that's when you start to realize, like, oh, okay, well, there are some jobs that require 10 out of 10 crypto nativity, right? Or 99 percentile crypto nativity, right? And those are things that, you try to look for the soft skills that go along with the hard skills, right? Which is, yes, you are 99% crypto native, but also like relatively commoditized, right? All the information's out there. You're passionate about it, you can learn it. But on the flip side, can you or do you have the soft skills needed to grow, right? Are you a great communicator? Are you attentive? Are you detail oriented? Right? Those are soft skills that you can pair with hard skills. And so when we look for hard skills in crypto, we also want to pair them with soft skills. Or for other jobs and other positions in crypto, it's not as necessary to be crypto native, right? If you're a CFO, as long as you kind of get it, like, and you kind of understand the tools and everything like that, you don't need to fucking know what the yield is on IBGT on Bear Chain right now. Like that, no one cares, right? Like you're a fucking CFO of a company, right? You're just running books, and unless that company is like doing treasury yield strategies, which is like super ballsy to do when you have payroll to pay every month, then like you don't need like a high end CFO. I mean, you don't need like a 10 out of 10 crypto native CFO. You just need someone that's a really good CFO or VP of finance that gets it, right? And so, and that extrapolates to other positions as well. So again, like there is no one size fit all yes answer. Like yes, you need to hire crypto natives, and or yes, you need to hire non crypto natives and teach them crypto. Like you can be fucking McKinsey, consultant, been doing that for 10 years, but if you don't give a shit about this space, it's gonna be pretty hard to be successful, right? Like if you don't see the vision and you're not passionate about it. And so again, it's all a series of trade-offs, and it's a situational kind of analysis, right? So it's like in this
Yeah.
situation, where do I think of things on like axes and trade-offs? So it's like, okay, well, if you have like an axis and it's like crypto nativity and work experience, sometimes you're gonna want. I mean, ideally, you have unicorns that are here that are like crypto native and have a ton of experience, but a lot of times you're not going to get those unicorns. They're unicorns for a reason. And so then it's like, what are you willing to trade off, right? Are you willing to trade off in this role being less crypto native, but then also having really great work experience. So really great work experience, but not super crypto native. You're down here. Or on the other side, you want someone who's like, I need someone who's super crypto native, someone that's like a fucking meme artist and really gets CT culture. And like I'm okay if they're soft around the edge, or if they're soft around the edges and they're not, great communicators and they lack some traditional consulting skills, right? Because I don't need them to be a perfect consultant. I need them to be a CT wizard, right? So again, situation.
And also, I think like a follow up to that is we have recently seen Solana, Nikita being kind of joining the Solana as advisor. Super, super excited what he does. Do you think this kind of becomes a trend where people who are super successful in the TradeFi world kind of see the opportunity at least from this year? Do you think this kind of becomes a trend from a builder point of view?
I think there are certain pockets where, yes, I think there are pockets of the industry that are on the collision course with their traditional counterparts, right? So I see this very clearly in what I kind of call like future finance, which is these two massive heavyweights that are about to collide between traditional finance and like on-chain finance or DeFi. I prefer the term like on-chain finance because I think DeFi is like more theater. Like it's like, okay, well, this shit's not decentralized, right? Hyperliquid is not decentralized. We don't need to call it DeFi. It's on-chain finance, which is okay. Like I think there is a gap between decentralization and permissionlessness. I think it's cool if things are permissionless and maybe progressively decentralized. But that's probably a different discussion for a different day. I love, and I think another category going back to Nikita is social, right? Where I don't think it's going to be like on-chain social or socialfi and then like traditional Web2 social media. I think these things are going to run into each other, and it's all just going to be a social network. And that's why I'm so fucking bullish on guys like Nikita coming into the industry more, because he is not a crypto bro, right? But what he is he understands how to build really fucking sticky applications, right? Applications that get people in, that draw wildfire. And I think people are really underestimating the impact of that on the on-chain landscape as a whole. So like, if you see like a new hot consumer app, right? Like let's take one of Nikita's old ones, like, gas app or something like that, right? Where like, people will gas you up anonymously or whatever, right? And his superpower is stickiness, is one, being able to do crazy stunts to acquire users, right? And get like a really, really strong user base, like get that virality. And two, stickiness of that user base, which is once he gets virality, he keeps people coming back. Now, how long that is that people keep coming back for is a different discussion, right? I don't think anything in social media outside of like the big 4 or 5 has been able to have real user retention stickiness. But that doesn't mean that you don't build really great businesses for short periods of time, right? Like, say what you want about like Friendtech going to zero. Guess what? They all still made a lot of fucking money, right? And so at the end of the day, like, that's still a win. Just because everyone bitches and Racer left Twitter doesn't mean that Friendtech was not incredibly fucking successful for the time that it was there, right? And
Yeah,
so,
and
okay.
no, go ahead. No, I was saying like on the Nikita part. Yesterday, the founder of ClearSpace, I tweeted out that someone should build like a ClearSpace with a token. The push-up thing that you have to do for like social media. The founder actually responded to that, and then he was like, what do you mean ClearSpace with a token? And I ended up explaining the whole thing to him. And then, with Nikita joining in, the only prompt I had for him to be interested in joining the space was mentioned like Nikita joined Solana, so you should definitely like talk to Raj Sholi and try to get connected there. So I think it's definitely going to help the Solana consumer ecosystem. I do want to, Ishan, roll it back to hiring. I know you've talked a lot about, like even when I was starting my career, you were telling me like everyone should start their career at like a crypto marketing agency because you get like a holistic view of everything. Do you think is that still the sort of thesis for like hiring new people, and that's sort of the pull when it comes to like a marketing agency hiring top talent?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily just a marketing agency, but I think let's peel back the reasoning behind it, right? Which is, I have quite a lot of conviction that people should work in large work environments early in their career. Call it like quote unquote corporate, which I don't necessarily think it is. Like, you can be at a really large startup that's 50 to 100 people because you understand what really high quality work looks like, right? Like when I graduated, I went immediately into like, running a business. And I actually regret that looking back because I didn't understand what really great work looked like. Right. And then once I worked in more traditional settings, I started realizing, oh, okay, this is what world-class work looks like. And this is how you navigate corporate environments. And this is how you grow and you manage people and you get managed and you manage up. And these are all really important skills. This is how you do sales, corporate sales, things like that. Right. That is really important in growing a holistic individual as far as like, how can you be the most dangerous person that you can be, right? How do you become the most dangerous, worker, builder, whatever, right? And so there's a lot to be learned from other people. And when you're in environments with a lot of other people, there's a lot of places to learn. So one, I think it's important that you work in a place with a lot of other people. And then the second piece of that is, which gets to like maybe the agency component, is the reason why I would say that is because of the diversity of opportunity, right? And I talk about this a lot. You guys have obviously heard this before, which is, I think agencies are like index funds, and and in working at an individual project is like full porting into one stock, right? So like, yes, you can do that with your capital, but what's even more valuable than your capital is your career, right? And so you're making a really big bet on a single project. And there are times and situations where that makes a lot of sense. But if you're early in your career, you don't necessarily understand exactly what your superpower or skill set is. You don't understand how to be incredibly impactful, things like that. Then it makes a lot of sense to go for a diversity of opportunity, right? Where you can see a lot of different companies, right? You can see how 10 different marketing agencies operate in a 3-month span or a 6-month span. And you can see how 10 different CEOs operate their companies. And so you get this diversity of opportunity where, yeah, an index fund, you're not going to make as much money if you go full port a single stock, right? And you're not going to know as a total amount, or you're not going to have maybe as much upside as you could working at an agency versus working at one individual company. But guess what? A lot of individual companies fail. A lot of stocks individually fail. And so do you have the conviction to go full port? Or, which I think there's a right time and a right place for, right? you're a young guy, you have really great experiences, you can take you have a high risk appetite, you have the ability to take risk. Right? You don't have a wife yet, you don't have a kids yet, maybe your family situation, your monetary situation, etc., allows you to take a ton of risk. Well, hey, then go full port, right? 90+% of startups fail. Statistically, it's likely that whatever one stock you pick or whatever one company you go to invest the next season of your career into is going to fail. But if you have conviction, fucking do it, right? Like take that risk. I have like some of the biggest risk appetite you'll ever meet, right? Like I am all about it. But there are certain times where it makes sense to, hey, I don't know what I want to do, or I don't feel like I have a lot of clarity about the type of company or the type of project that I really want to go build, right? And so when that is the case, then you probably want to pick an index fund, right? Or you probably want to pick an agency where you can get diversity of opportunity, experience, in order to build a more well-rounded version of yourself or build a more experienced version of yourself. So that then, again, I'm all about waiting and wandering. Naval talks about this a lot, right? Like you should think of your career like a lion, where a lion sits around, they wait, they fuck around, they sit days at a time laying there. But then when they find what they want, they fucking go after it, right? And I think people should think about the career more like that as well. It's like, if you're just waiting around, then you find that opportunity, you build that conviction, and then you go get it, right? And you attack it with 110% force and energy and opportunity. And then you finish that, and then you maybe wait around. And if you're thinking about waiting around or waiting for the right opportunity, then there's no better place to do it than an agency, because obviously you still want to grow and you want to learn and you want to be reading and thinking and, getting exposure. And there's no better place to get exposure than a place where you're going to get diversified opportunities, where that's a VC fund, right? And this is not necessarily just a quip on agencies. It could be a VC fund, it could be a PE fund, it could be a accelerator, like just a place where you get diverse opportunity, where you might not get as much upside, but what better investment is there when you're young than invest in your career and your experience? Like there's no better ROI on that and your future earning potential.
Yeah, and I think as you used to call it back in the day, like Scribe is a CMO factory, and I could sort of name out everyone that sort of graduated out of Scribe and is doing really well. The flip side to that, Ishan, is when people come in to learn, like they eventually sort of want to leave. And you've always talked about this death spiral for agencies, and I found that theory really interesting. For everyone listening, can you explain like what is the death spiral theory for agencies, and where's the equilibrium for like clients, talent, and how does Scribe think about that?
Yeah. The agency death spirals is an interesting concept. I think like, again, it tends to be a low moat business, and you see a lot of agencies rise and fall. Like a lot of people have built really successful agencies. Very few people have built like generational companies, and that is more my focus. Is I want to build a generational company, and so in order to do that, you have to like study what other people have done well, what other people have not done well, right? If you want to be Ogilvy, probably makes sense to look at like Ogilvy and all their competitors and what happened at that time in order for them to be so successful and great for 100 years now, where like everyone else, like, so many people came and died in the interim, right? This is a high failure rate business. It's almost like restaurants, where like, again, everybody has walked into a restaurant and been like, fuck, I want to build a restaurant because like, look at all this money and this table's paying this much. Every single person has done it. And so everyone has always thought about, I should start a restaurant, right? Because you look at it and it's low moat, right? It's not like you need to be a fucking Michelin star chef to open a restaurant. Anybody can do it. Anybody can build it. And you look at the money and you're like, it's easy, right? Same thing with the agency. You don't need to be like a PhD marketing professor to be able to start an agency. Anyone can fucking do it. There's so many different services to offer. And so everybody sees it. Everybody thinks they can do it. And so what happens is the agency death spiral is typically you get to a certain point in an agency after scaling up where typically what happens with agencies is you hit this artificial ceiling, which is you grow to a certain point where your headcount grows, your headcount exceeds the quality of work that you do, right? And what happens when your headcount starts to exceed the quality, it's not like an exact number, but it's more like, hey, when you were this big, you had this much quality, and now you're this big and you're doing this much quality, right? And what tends to happen there is, okay, well, the first time it happens, maybe you have some clients leave, right? It's like, okay, a couple clients left, we just reset, right? We reset and, it's okay, maybe, we have a flat month, or, our growth goes down a little bit. It's okay, happens. Clients leave all the time, right? And then maybe it happens a second time where it's like, oh, you see like a quick exodus of clients, right? 2, 3, 4 clients leave in like a small period of time, right? And now it's like, okay, well, maybe we need to go risk off a little bit. Maybe we need to, or maybe in the first scenario when it first happens, maybe you're like, okay, maybe we need to freeze hiring, where we don't need to hire anymore, right? And until we get back in a good footing. Then you get back into a good footing, you start hiring again, and then it happens a second time where your headcount's growing, you see the quality decreasing, and then more clients leave. Okay, so instead of freezing hiring, maybe you have a negative month, maybe you have a negative quarter, and oh, actually, maybe we need to cut some heads, right? And that's where the debt spiral begins, because if the number of people in your workforce is exceeding the increase in quality of the work that you're doing, what tends to happen is, let's say it happens a second time. Once it happens a third time, you start to build like a little bit of a negative brand, right? Which is like, hey, man, those guys, they don't do really great work, right? They're not that great. I worked with them. There's all these founder group chats where people are talking about, hey, I worked at this agency, I worked with this market maker, stuff like that. And they have just like shit sessions, right? And so then you start to see like, if one person is like, hey, I didn't have a great experience with an agency, let's say Scribe, right? Okay, well, one person says it, whatever, right? Individual outlier, right? But then you start to see one person puts in one of these group chats and they're like, hey, I'm thinking about this agency, should we use them? And then one person's like, don't use them, we didn't have a good experience. And then another person, and then another person, and then another person, right? All saying that they didn't have great experiences. Then maybe you have one person that's like, hey, I worked with them, like they were awesome, right? Well, then what happens is, you start to have a negative brand where then maybe you lose that business, right? And so now you're no longer getting as much business as you maybe were previously, right? And so now you have more churn, and your revenue is not growing as fast. And then you start to see, and then you have to lay off some people. And as soon as that set of layoffs happen, it's okay, right? What you typically do is you cut your bottom 10% performers. You're like, hey, these guys are pretty expendable. They're not really great at their jobs. And so then you kind of get rid of them. Then what happens is, the next time that happens, like let's say again, your headcount goes up too high, and your revenue is not growing as fast, and your churn is getting too high. Then your top performer, and you maybe do that 2 or 3 more times. You cut your bottom 10%, cut your bottom 10%. It's always good to cut the bottom 10%, right? You want higher quality people in there. You think that's going to fix things. If you don't solve the fundamental issues of the quality of work that you're doing, it's going to continue to happen. And then the impact of that is you go into what we call like the agency debt spiral, which is then after a while, your top performers start to look around, which are the people that the whole company is built on. Because again, all you have at an agency is talent. It's the only moat you have. That's all you have. And so you need to be so protective and so of that top talent that if they start to leave, shit goes sideways, right? So it's like, oh, well, now a couple of the top people at the company left because, they see these persistent issues that, business is going down and the brand is getting worse and they're hearing whispers and things like that. Your top performers leave. Well, then you have clients that are like, oh man, like I really only like that person. They're a top performer here. They're really the only person I wanted to work with. And now that they're gone, I don't really see a need to be here. And then they start to leave. And then, well, your top talent is leaving and your top clients are leaving. And it gets into this death spiral of more bad chatter about the work that you're doing. It becomes harder to acquire really high quality talent. And you're not bringing in as much new business as you were previously. And then you start to kind of settle down. And you maybe have like one more shot to go back at it and do it really well. But again, if your quality of work is not great, you're toast. And you're just going to slowly go down. Where at one point you're like, oh man, we're fucking crushing it. We're doing like, $500,000 a month in revenue, to all of a sudden you're back to like 100, 200K a month in revenue. And now you don't have a sustainable business. And that is like the debt spiral where we see this time and time again, where agencies grow really big and great, and then they kind of die off.
And also, a big part of that is when the bull run starts, everyone gets excited and they kind of start these. Everyone wants to work with the agency. They just want to outsource everything to someone, and just they kind of these projects come up and they look for the agencies. So probably a question to that is, how do you stay cycle resistant and be you just don't want to appear in the bull run and not do anything to the bear market. So
Yeah.
how do you kind of keep building during every cycle, and it doesn't matter what market it is. Uh, yeah, I think it again comes back to the quality of work. But yeah, what's the on
Yeah. Hey, KG, you know this better than anyone, man. It just comes back down to the quality of the work. If you do really great work there, and I think this actually goes really well into the new market structure that we have, which is like, I think it's pretty consensus now that like 4-year cycle is over. Like we're not going to see these perfect 4-year cycles where everything goes up 10x. Like it's just too many fucking tokens. Like it's impossible. There is not enough liquidity, like probably in the world, for all tokens to pump at all time, like everything to pump together. Everything's going up 3, 4, 5x. Like that, those days are done, right? So you're going to get pockets of outperformance, and when you have pockets of outperformance, you need to that's going to be more beneficial to companies that provide really great work regardless of market conditions than anywhere else, right? Than anything else. And so in a world where you always have pockets of outperformance, someone always needs really, really great work, regardless of what the rest of the market is doing. And so I think it's kind of actually pretty bullish for us because it allows us to create a cycle-proof business. Because I mean, honestly, like cycles are kind of done, right? And so there's no longer going to be a thing of creating a cycle-proof business. It's just, do you have a great business? And I think this is, again, when you think about like the collision course of like on-chain finance and TradFi, and you think about the future of social, and it's not just going to be crypto social and regular social. It's all just going to be social. In that same way, it's not going to be like like shitty agents, like uh, I guess like it's not going to be crypto business and like regular business. It's all just going to be really good business, right? Like, and so the bar for quality founders is going to go up. The bar for running quality businesses is just going to go up. And so it's not going to be like, hey, you run a cycle proof crypto business. Like, do you just have a great fundamental business? Because like, yes, there are like, you cannot like large scale macroeconomic crashes, like 2008 GFC is like a different ballgame. Like that takes everybody down with it, right? Like fucking Bear Stearns and like massive companies, AIG getting bailed out, shit like that, right? Like there's massive multinational macroeconomic events is going to take like it's going to take down any bad business. But now it's no longer about like that's the only thing, and that disproportionately affects poorly run businesses, right? So again, it's not about like, can this company survive a bad cycle? It's just like, there's not going to be cycles anymore. So it's just like, do you run a really great business, because you do really great work, so that regardless of if, number in this category is up or down, one, can you perform regardless of that? And two, are you picking the right clients? And this is one of the biggest things that I see agencies fuck up. Is it's really hard when someone comes to you with money and a bag and say, oh, I'm not going to take your money. It's really hard. But once you build the muscle to do that is when you unlock a service business or an agency type business,
Yeah.
because you're picking, it is more important to pick your clients than for clients to pick you, right? Think about like, I don't know, a good analogy for this is like attractive woman at the bar. Like you don't want to be the pick me woman, right? That's like, oh, okay, you want to talk to me, you want to talk to me, you want to talk to me, right? You want to be the woman that finds the most high value person and engages with that person, right? You don't want 100 nobodies, you want one right person, right? In that same way, you don't want 100 bullshit projects. You want one really great project that's building for a multi-year period, that you have a really great relationship and partnership with, that you have the right program for, and you build with them like that, and you build a really great, really strong relationship over a multi-year period, because these guys aren't building for cycles, right? They're not looking to pump and dump. They're looking to build generational companies that are here for decades. And that's when agencies do really
Yeah.
well, is like, take
Like
the good stuff and actually.
another thing that I noticed and probably changed, as you said, cycles don't kind of fly anymore. Another thing I we kind of observed is modes for these protocols. Before it used to be we are this much decentralized, and that's how we kind of differentiate and all that. I don't think people are is kind of applying anymore, saying we are this decentralized. Like recently we saw, like even hyperliquid, right? Like the thing that went kept on going up. People are still questioning about these projects. They don't really care about decentralization. People want fast and cheap and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, it like comes down to two big modes. That's trust and distribution.
Mhm.
So do you kind of agree with that, where trust and distribution become the two biggest modes for protocol? And in terms of marketing, like how does that change this messaging aspect and the branding aspect, where mode and like for trust and distribution part?
Yeah. I say this a lot. I mean, like this decentralization thing, that's one thing, right? I think in an open source world, uh, there is no moat, right? Like if everything is forkable, and especially when you think about, I mean, there's certain pockets like DeFi, like it's kind of table stakes to be open source. I know like Hyperliquid's obviously like a good, and I think eventually they will be. I think eventually they will open source. They will continuously decentralized. But like if you look at Uniswap, it's like, hey, like the V4 logic is all out there, right? Like you can fork V4 anytime you want. Maybe not V4 just because it's new and maybe they have the BSL license, stuff like that. And yeah, like licensing is something I don't know a ton about, and that changes this a little bit. But theoretically, right, high level like kind of theory is in an open source world, product is not a moat. So then what is the moat? The moat is brand, right? Like the brand is what differentiates. And so like and brands, and building the brand in the right category. For example, in Uniswap's case, like they built a brand on trust and reliability, right? I think Aave is a really great example of this, where like they've built a brand on like it fucking works. It doesn't matter if you get $1 billion or $1, it fucking works, right? And so they have a brand of trust. Now, someone could literally fork Aave, the exact same thing, and do it. They're not going to have that trust and lindiness. I don't care if you literally didn't change the code at all and you literally just redeployed it with a new front end. That does not change the fact that you do not have that trust and lindiness that Aave has. They've built a brand on security, and Uniswap has built a brand on innovation. And so that is the key driver of differentiation is what do people think about when they think about your company? Because I can open up right next to McDonald's and I can cook the same burger. I can hire the same guy to cook the same burger. I can go get the meat from the same place. That doesn't mean I'm McDonald's, right? And again, like brand by definition is like irrational, right? It is not rational for me to spend $30 on a Nike t-shirt that is like realistically $1, right? Why do I do it? Because fucking just do it, right? Like they built really great brand. I want to be associated with that. A better example for me currently is like Aloe. Like, yeah, I spend $70 on an Aloe t-shirt. It's a plain fucking black t-shirt, but I spend $70 on it. It's totally irrational. Why? Because I like the brand and I like the quality and I like, the shit that they do. And they have a good name. And when, like I see someone with the Aloe on the back, I'm like, this guy gets it, like this guy has nice taste. And this guy's he's got some money, right? Like if he can spend $70 on a t-shirt, it's probably doing pretty well. So it seems like a guy I'd get along with, even though I've never met the guy. Right. And so in that same way, it's like you look at protocols, it's like, what are protocols doing to differentiate themselves beyond just like, hey, look at this product feature we have, because product feature is not a moat in an open source world. What is it's like, what does your project stand for? What do you guys think about? What direction are you guys going in? What are you guys contributing to the world? Those are the important things, right? And Uniswap contributes a ton. Aave contributes a ton. That's why they're very forkable projects, but nobody's ever going to touch them because they just unless they like stop innovating or something like that, right? But yeah, brand is the moat, man.
Would you say that's the same for like any marketing agency? Because well, anyone could start a marketing agency, right? And like everyone does, but only few succeed. Like, is it more the brand, or like is the brand the quality of work? How would you define it for that?
Both. Yeah, 100%. It's both. Like the brand is like a lot of brand is just the culmination of the work that you do, right? And so like you are, what you do, you are who you spend your time with. And so like, if you're like one of these agencies that like just does like shitty KOL campaigns and stuff like that, well, guess what? You're going to build a brand as like, and people are going to know you as the people that do shitty KOL campaigns, right? And just like, do shill jobs, right? Versus like if you do a lot of really great work, you're going to be known as someone that does really great work. I think you really nailed it, right? It's like agencies are like the ultimate form of brand, right? Going back to like you don't get fired if you hire Ogilvy. That's what Scribe wants to be. Scribe wants to be the place where like, hey, you're not going to get fired hiring Scribe. Like they're Lindy, they've been here, they know what they're doing, they're smart, they're experienced, they're technical, they're native, they get it, and so like you can take the risk on somebody, but the quality of work that Scribe does. We have a standard, just like you hire any consulting company. Anybody can be a consultant, right? But why do you go to EY? Why do you go to Accenture? Why do you go to Deloitte? Because they build great fucking brands, and you're not gonna fuck things up going over there. Why do you watch the Lakers, right? Like over the Sacramento Kings? It's like Showtime.
No, for sure. Yeah, and okay, so I want to dial it up a little and just double down on that. I'm pretty sure you've seen the marketing agency FUD on the timeline. Like it's pretty prevalent. Like founder-led marketing versus agency-led marketing. I would assume in like the traditional world, when you talk about like the agencies that Nike hires, like Nike probably isn't ashamed to admit that they use a marketing agency or they use a brand agency. Why is that different in Web3, where if you're using a marketing agency, that's considered bearish? Maybe let's start off with a different question. Maybe let's start off with, since the FUD has started on the timeline about marketing agencies, has deal flow come down and like has client interest come down in working with Scribe?
Yeah, you said like why is it that way? Why does Web3 kind of like look down at working agencies? Because Web3 is fucking stupid, you know. Because the people that run these companies are 25-year-old kids who have never like worked at a company. They have no idea what it takes to build a company or what, you know. Like if you want to build a world class org, like you got to learn from people that have built world class orgs. And like going back to the Nike example, it's like Weidman. Nike is known for only working with Weidman Kennedy. Weidman Kennedy is like one of these Ogilvy Edelman types. They like you look at Weidman Kennedy's bio right now, it'll say Nike in the bio. There, that is a proud partnership because Nike knows, and Weidman Kennedy is one of these agencies that has been around for 200 years, right? And like Nike is proud of that because they know Weidman Kennedy does really great work. Why does everyone shit on crypto marketing agencies? Because they don't do good fucking work. They all do terrible. I mean, I don't want to say everybody. I want to shit on other people, but everybody does really fucking bad work. And so it creates it because there is no moat and there's a cash grab opportunity. And for a large portion of the time, it was more about the demand was so high, the need was so high, the stakes were so high that you know, like you just needed someone to do it, right? It's like if you were launching a project and you're like, hey, if I bring in a really good agency and, you know, my friend who launched this other, you know, shitcoin soft rug project used this other agency and, you know, hey, they helped their token pump from, you know, 20 mil market cap to 250 mil market cap. And this guy made 2 million bucks on, and like my buddy made 2 million bucks on it. Maybe I should hire those guys as well. Where it's like, maybe those are market conditions. Maybe it was a good thesis. Maybe they had some, you know, KOL who was like really hot at that time, who shilled it at the perfect time or something like that. There's so many factors that go into it. But overall, it's because the quality of work is so fucking bad. Like people don't understand like basic marketing fundamentals. Like I see some of these posts in some of these groups and like or in some of these like fucking Web3 Twitter communities and shit, or some of these like Web3 marketing influencers. I'm like, you are so fucking stupid. Like you just like, and I hate to be that guy, but it's like you just like you don't understand like basic marketing fundamentals. Like there is no Web3 marketing, Web2 marketing. Like yes, there are some aspects of Web3 that do make it a little bit different, such as community building, right? But like what is like you make it seem like community building is not a thing in Web2. Like you think Nike doesn't have a fucking community just because they don't pack them in a Discord like sardines? That's fucking stupid. Like there is no like marketing is marketing. Like this is like 200, this is like 1,000 years of human psychology that goes into what gets people to buy and resonate with stuff. There is no like, oh, because you do it on a chain versus in like a fucking SQL database, that there's any difference. Like just because you're an e-com company versus you're like a DeFi protocol, like it's all market psychology. Like yes, there are specific things within each category. Just like you're not going to market a fucking t-shirt in the same way you're going to market a car. You're not going to market a car in the same way you're going to market a DeFi protocol. You're not going to market a DeFi protocol in the same way you market an infrastructure protocol. But there's general high level ideas around marketing that are, you know, like that are generational, right? Like that exceed any individual thought, right? Or any individual instance. It's like, hey, like audience message channel, like that's common fucking sense. It doesn't matter if you're Web 2, you're Web 3. Building a really great brand, like it doesn't matter if you're Web 2 or Web 3. Those things are important irrespective of that. And the barrier for entry in the space is so low. The supply demand gap between quality talent and the need for talent is so skewed, and the stakes are so high to say, you know, hey, if you can just like help me pump this thing from like 10 million market cap to 200 million market cap, I'm gonna make 10 million bucks and I'm gonna go fuck off. And so I will pay you what I just need someone to do it. I don't care what you do, fucking try it. And if it doesn't work, guess what? I'm just gonna like soft drug this thing and I'm gonna try it again on another app. Right. And then you have all these people that are doing these marketing campaigns for shit projects, and they, you know, maybe they get tokens or they're getting paid, but they're not doing good work because it's so easy to pump tokens, right? And there's so many other things that go into pumping tokens, right? You could run a beautiful marketing campaign, but if the project is dog shit, it's not going to matter. You can run a dog shit marketing campaign, but if the product is really fucking good, it's going to work, right? Like I think Pendle, I mean, not to like, I love Pendle. I think Pendle's a beautiful product. I don't think that they did anything that's like super amazing on the go-to-market side. They just did a really fucking great product. And like, and the problem is that people think that because they have been involved in a successful project, that makes them a marketing genius. Where it's like, hey, like, contrary to this conversation, I would say I'm a relatively humble, like learning guy, where it's like, I know I'm not like a marketing god or expert. I don't think there exists one in crypto. I think it's more about like, having humility to learn from people and have conversations and think about how we can do things better. Learn from Web 2, learn from Web 3, learn from traditional experts, learn from crypto experts. Like we really encourage the team to just gather information, grow, learn, because this industry is so nascent. There is no one who's like, oh, I've cracked it. Like there's no one that's like, there's nobody that's gone out and done super, super successful marketing campaigns across multiple crypto companies. There's not a single person out there that's done that. That's like, oh, I'm this god that I've done it at every company I've done with. There is no agency that's done that. There is no individual person that's done that. There's no superstar CMO that's done that. Even like, dude, like you look at fucking Kate Roosh, who was the CMO at Coinbase, who I regard as probably like, Michael Jordan of crypto marketing, right? And she left when she went to OpenAI, right? Like, so like, there is no awesome person that's out there that's like, oh, like I know everything. I get it. I get it better than everybody. It's so frustrating when I hear stuff about like some of these people that people consider like marketing influencers. And then I talk to some of the projects that they work on, and the projects are like, oh my God, that person was a nightmare. They were so bad, this and that. And it's like, well, like you just have a little more humility, man. Just like, accept that you don't need to know everything. You don't need to be an expert. There are no experts, dude. This whole fucking industry has been around for 10 years. And rant.
What are some of your favorite marketing ads?
Ooh, that is a really good question.
I mean, just saying like Solana, not Solana one recently, but
Yeah.
like what are some of your favorite? I really like the Coinbase one when we hit 100K. But what are some of your favorite campaigns or ads that you did?
And I think just following up on that, do you think crypto becomes I know we're on like a separate tangent, but on the ads thing, do you think crypto will become a lot more visual? Like you see a lot of the Solana people do like actual ads, and then you see like Uniswap trying to do something similar. Like, is that something that Scribe is also trying to think about?
Yeah, definitely. So to hit the first point, it's hard to think of great ads on the spot. Coinbase has done some really, really great ones that really like invoke quality emotion, and that that like are like actually transformative for the industry as a whole. So I think like Coinbase definitely does the best job. When I think about like who has done really great campaigns or who has built really great brand, like I think as far as like brand building, and I think the Bearchain guys are like world class. I think like that's like they've built a really fucking strong cult, and they've done it multiple ways, and they've done it without really spending a ton of money on marketing, like traditional marketing. And so they're really great marketers without needing to be traditional marketers. And so I think they've done a really great job of brand building, and just like the it's not real and chain's not real, and they started from fucking smoking JPEG NFTs, and now it's like a $10 billion protocol or whatever. Like it's fucking nuts, right? But I think there are some pretty good creative campaigns that have been done in this space, but I think majority of them are probably by like Coinbase. I think even like the sexes don't even do a great job, right? Like I think like I don't think Binance has ever done great creative. I don't think Bybit's ever done great creative. I don't think even like Kraken, not really. Crypto.com, not really. I think Crypto.com buying Staples or buying the naming rights to Staples is going to end up being like one of the best generational trades. Because like when you hear like you have LeBron and then you got Luka now, so it's like, oh, you basically have like 20 years of sustained like excellence, and every time someone talks about the NBA, they're going to say Crypto.com. So I think it's probably one of the best ROIs I've ever seen in the space, which is
Whenever I watch one of those shows, it's like they first say Staples and they say kind of crypto.com again.
100%. And like for the longest time, I didn't even know that like Staples Center was meant as like Staples the office.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was like a Staples Center, right? Like, and so I think that's going to happen in the cryptos. Like, yeah, it's Crypto Center, Crypto.com. So I think that's going to be one of the best ROIs. But it's funny to juxtapose it against like FTX Arena in Miami and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Separate story there.
Yeah.
Repeat your last question for me, Chip.
Do you think we're going to be a lot more visual with our campaigns?
I think this is a place where this is probably like the next iteration of Scribe is like we want to be able to do really, really high quality production. And I don't think you necessarily need to have like a full in-house production team, but you do need to have really, really great creative directors. And I think you're starting to see this with like the OpenAI image stuff. Like the value will not necessarily be on like the ability to totally execute a vision. It's going to be even more valuable to have really, really great creative direction, right? And so the value capture is going to be done by really, really great creatives who can think of unique, interesting, funny campaigns. Rather than the people that can just execute and build this. I don't think you need a production team in order to do really high quality production. Like there's, you can do a production for a high quality commercial with anybody, any team, every city, every mid-sized city, not even major city, every mid-sized city has like a really, really good quality production team that can build you what you want. But what you need is a really good creative director. And so we don't need to necessarily build like a team that has cameras that we fly out to places to do these videos. We needed someone who can direct a team to go be able to execute that. And I think that is definitely the next iteration, because I think there is a world where we start to see, I think it'll be like institutions, right? You'll see Bitwise and ARC and, and BlackRock start to do more crypto ads, right? They're going to want really high quality crypto ads. They're going to need to work with someone that gets crypto, but also understands like high quality production. And that's where we would definitely want to be at Scribe, so that we have the ability to work with T. Rowe Price and, and Franklin
Yeah.
Campbell, guys like that. And then also there's like, I think all the sexes are going to have to start getting into it. Whether it's like, a Kraken is going to get into it more. Crypto.com is going to get into more like high quality creative, like, running Super Bowl ads, shit like that. I think all that's going to come back. And then you have like is there going to be a world where Aave is like running TV ads to, get loans on Aave, right? Or maybe there's RWA protocols, or maybe it's stable coins, right? And maybe like, BOA is going to launch a stable coin and they're going to probably do a pretty big creative campaign. And so to go back to your question about like, we definitely see that. It's definitely coming. And you're going to need a team that gets traditional production and has experience there, but then also is crypto native and gets how to do it in like a tasteful way that doesn't piss off your core community. And we definitely want to be positioned to be able to do that for sure.
Yeah, I think like even with regulations getting a lot better, you see like I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Uniswap ad on like the US TV pretty soon. Cool. No, I think this is like our longest podcast yet. Ishan, we usually end these with like a short clip. This is probably like the thumbnail equivalent. Like this is where the clip starts. What is your one advice for someone who's starting a marketing agency right now, who's thinking about it right now?
Don't do it. Don't do it, man. I don't say that out of competition. I love competition, man. I would like to think one of the most generous people, where like anytime anyone asks me questions, I will 100% wholeheartedly give you the best advice that I can. I will open up everything. I will show you whatever you want to. I've gone into numbers with people, books, like exact instances, experiences, everything. I'm an open book. Anybody can come learn anything they want from me. I'm always out, like down to have a conversation with anybody. I'm super open with my time. Like I'm all about the people. I think people is the most important thing in crypto, in really any business. Don't fucking do it, dude. It's hard. It's long. It's annoying. And only when you cross a certain threshold does it all become worth it. And it's so hard to cross that threshold. Candidly, I don't even think we've crossed that threshold yet, where it's like you're on the other side of the hill where the ball starts to roll itself down and everything becomes easier. 3 years in an industry that's like not even 15 years old, we're still not there. And it's really freaking hard to build a world-class agency because it's such a fast-paced environment. It is low moat. There's always new great talent that's coming out, but it's really fucking hard. And so unless you want to like, commit the next like 5 years of your life minimum, then what's typically going to happen, what happens to most people is that you're going to grow and then you're going to fall and then you're going to look at yourself and you're going to be like, fuck, was all that worth it? And so like, there's a lot of businesses to build. There's a lot of need for businesses in crypto. There's a lot of need for traditional businesses, service businesses, traditional equity businesses in crypto. There's a massive need for regular non-token businesses. And so find something to build. But if you want to build an agency, like do it the right way, work with great people, hire great talent, work with great projects. Do not take money from anywhere and everywhere. I think that's crazy. And it's going to like play the long game. If you're going to play the long game with long people, if you think you're going to come in, make a little bit of money, get a couple clients, and then like bounce out, you're not going to be successful in my view, most likely. At least like what success is to me. But if you really want to play the long game, just something you're passionate about, you love it, you love people, you love, being creative and things like that, then yeah, dude, it's a great business that's given me a lot. And I don't regret it at all. But there's a lot of problems to solve out there. So like, I would just think about it in the terms of like, find a problem and solve it to the best of your ability. And if you do, then people will pay you for it, hopefully.
Yeah. And if you want to build rewind back and watch from the start and then hit Ishan's DMs, because he's an open book. Yeah. All right. Thanks so much, Ishan. Thanks for your time, man. I really appreciate this.
Anytime. You guys know I love you guys.
All right. Love you too, Ishan. Bye.
Oh, fuck. Are we done?